Welcome to Product Coffee. I'm Jason Brett, and for those of you who are new, and what we're going to do today, it's our monthly product management roundtable. Every month, around the first week of the month, there are some weeks that we kind of go back and forth a little bit on that with, but around the first week of the month, we throw a question out to the Product Coffee audience and say, let's just talk about this in a really open forum and get your thoughts, get your perspective, and dive a little bit deeper on this topic from a lot of different directions, see what the questions about it are, and see what we can all contribute to building a better understanding. I want to take a quick moment to thank our sponsors of Product Coffee. Method is a software development agency that focuses on everything from product strategy, from digital transformation and customer experience strategy, all the way through to software development and delivery. We're based in Charlotte, and I'm an employee of Method, although this is not a Method program. Method is a sponsor of Product Coffee. And we're based in Charlotte, but we have an office in Atlanta as well as New York, London, and Denver currently. So if your company is looking for scale and product expertise and digital transformation expertise, we'd love you to reach out to Method and support them and thank them for supporting Product Coffee. Pragmatic Institute is the most recognized name in product management training and certification in the world. They've trained literally tens of thousands of product professionals around the world. And about half the people on this call, I see names right now, that about half the people on this call right now have achieved some level of Pragmatic Institute certification. They've been a sponsor of Product Coffee and Product Camp since the very beginning. So if you're considering professional education, please consider Pragmatic Institute and thank them for supporting us as well. And finally, Feature Upvote provides some software for product managers to collect voice of the customer feedback directly from your customers. Your customers can go to a portal that you set up, make suggestions and feature requests for your product in a very self-contained software package. And then your customers can then vote on those suggestions that they see on the ideas board. And you can take that feedback, engage in conversations online to deepen your understanding of those requests. We use that here at Product Coffee on our ideas forum. If you go to productcoffee.com/ideas, you can make suggestions for future content for Product Coffee, and you can vote on suggestions that other people have made as well. So thank you to Feature Upvote as well. But today, we're going to talk about being product-led and what that means. And I want to start that conversation now and start getting some thoughts on what it means to be product-led and what your experiences are. We'll talk about some of the myths about being product-led and whether the concept even applies to every company represented here at Product Coffee today. So let's start with a definition. Dug around, and there seem to be a lot of misconceptions, or at least a lot of misalignments about what it means to be product-led. So I wanted to start with a pretty well-accepted definition. There's not necessarily a gospel definition, so to speak, but there is a product-led growth collective is a team that has been putting together a bunch of educational resources on the concept of moving towards being a product-led company. And they have a specific definition that they coined and published on their website. When we talk about product-led, normally that conversation means one of two things. It means, are we talking about product-led growth as a go-to-market strategy and as a business strategy? Or are we talking about product management is leading the organization and the product mentality and the product management process is at the forefront of how the company operates? One is a strategic approach, one is an operational approach. And we can talk about both of those today, but generally today in the ecosystem, when you hear people talking about product-led, they're talking about product-led growth. And that's a business methodology in which user acquisition, expansion, conversion, and retention are all driven primarily by the product itself. And we'll talk a little bit about what that means and how that might apply to the companies that we individually work for. One of the great examples that we hear about all the time of product-led growth is really the Slack is a great example of a company that has exploded due to a product-led growth strategy. They have a product out there. It's free to adopt with some pretty good functionality. And people start using this and share it with their colleagues and friends. And suddenly it becomes an indispensable business tool. And it becomes necessary and valuable for the organization where this product has been introduced kind of virally to take on a license and become a paying customer and expand their usage. There are different ways that you can take a product-led growth strategy, but Slack is one of the big examples of a company that had massive accelerated growth just through by putting a product out there, making themselves indispensable, and then asking for the money later. And that's one way of approaching a product-led growth strategy, but it's not the only way. So I'm interested in hearing from folks here on the call today. When you think of product-led, is that in alignment with how you think of it, or do you have a different definition for product-led? Be interested in your thoughts.
I think it also includes companies that are intentional in developing new products or innovating.
So if I take that and kind of expand on it, one of the characteristics of product-led companies is that they have typically already identified a problem in the marketplace, and they have a solution for that problem. And that solution comes in the form of a product. So if I take what you're saying, Craig, there are also product-led companies who are continually identifying new problems and bringing products to the table to solve those problems and using those to fuel their growth. Is that right?
Yeah.
Right.
Jason, just I don't know if this is helpful or not, but I look at our product. Our product is very different than Slack because our product's an enterprise type of application. It's not, and it's not necessarily a broad utilization. Like you get, every person in a 10,000, 50,000 organization, 50,000 person organization isn't going to use our product. So the idea of introducing the product and just saying it's just going to sell itself, it just doesn't work, right? In our particular environment. So, in order to expand the utilization of our product, we do have to rely heavily on sales and marketing, but we're still very much, it's all about the product, right? And really, maybe even more specifically about the problems that our product was created to solve, and I guess, whenever I think about how do we talk to our customers, we actually are not talking about the product much. We're really talking about, hey, here's the problems that we know that you're facing. Here's a value in having a solution to those problems. And hey, there's actually a product out there that solves those problems. It's called ASI. So it would help me, I think, if anybody has any thoughts about just what are the alternatives, right? What if you're not a product-driven organization, then what are the alternatives to being a product-driven, or the alternatives to being that type of organization? That I think that might help clarify in my mind what it means to be one or not to be one.
I'll jump in here with a thought along that lines, and that is that we always tend to think about products in terms of a thing, right? You mentioned your software product, ASI, and I think we tend to do that because we are all in the software space. But in actuality, a product can be other things as well. Pragmatic is a good example of where training is their product. Like their whole organization exists to promote that, and their approach to software delivery. Method has, Jason, I'm sure you could fully clarify this, but in Method's world, there's not a software product. It's the offering that you provide that is the product. And if you start thinking about it that way, Some alternatives that come to mind might be an organization that really doesn't care about solving a customer's problem. They just know that they can make a lot of money by putting something out there that'll get close enough. Maybe a sales-driven organization where they're not focused on the product itself. They're just focused on making a new sale, and whatever lipstick they have to put on that pig to make a new sale, they'll gladly do it.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And Method is not a products company at all. We're a service. We're an agency, and we provide services, but we help companies become products companies. So there is a little bit of a nuance to that. Having said that, there's kind of a dichotomy. There's a product-led growth strategy and a sales-led growth strategy. And some people might say there's also kind of a market-led growth strategy as well. But the distinction there is, in a sales-led growth strategy, you are relying on that human-powered sales process to get out and build the awareness and build the company's position and reputation within your target clients. Like, one of the things that I saw when I was doing some research before this session and after our last conversation on this topic was I found an article, and I actually put it in the links on the resources page, that was talking about some common myths about product-led companies. And by the way, I'm not sure where I stand on the value of product-led growth as the only solution for any company to follow going forward. I've heard some thinkers say that product-led growth is the only way forward. That may be true. I'm still examining my position on that. So as I was digging in, one of the articles that I found was on common myths about product-led growth. And one of them was very much, hey, it just doesn't apply to our company because, and I was talking to Jeff Durnovich over at LeaseQuery as well. He says, we may have, in any given company, we've probably got one user of LeaseQuery. So building that kind of viral approach to gaining a foothold inside a company doesn't apply to us. And that is very true. On the other hand, another product-led growth strategy or tactic does include providing something else of value that is low cost but highly valuable that you can provide so that you have that connection with your customer, so that when it comes time for them to actually buy the product that you're monetizing, you've already got that awareness, you've got that relationship. And there's some strategic thinking that can be done about that, about putting, and you see that in marketing organizations today. You'll see, for example, Terminus, a good Atlanta company, is really focused on flipping the funnel and B2B inbound marketing. And you've heard a lot about inbound marketing as well overall, where you provide a lot of thought and content at no charge to your potential customer to build that reputation with them. So the product-led growth mindset takes that concept of using that marketing approach and says, how can we build products that embed us in the hearts and minds of our best customers as well, and use that as our path to growth? Another part of product-led growth is building revenue from the foothold that you've got. So I've got my product embedded in my client, but how do I continue to expand value and grow the lifetime value of that particular customer by exposing new options and new revenue streams for us to them directly through the product that's already embedded with them? So there's a couple of other thoughts to consider.
Okay, I think that makes sense. I think maybe where I struggle just a little bit is that there are many ways to grow and to add value, and certainly to the extent that there are problems to be solved that you are uniquely positioned to solve, either in your current product or by expanding your offering. Focusing on the product to solve those problems makes, we should do that, right? We should certainly do that. There are other ways. I can't remember what the book is. I'm sure a lot of folks on this have read it, but and I can't even remember the author. But it was one of the points that he brought up was PayPal. He was one of the original founders, developers of PayPal, and he was kind of poo-pooing this concept of if you've got a great product, then you don't need a sales team, right? He was like, no, that's a load of junk, right? You do need good salespeople, and he was and people that can identify opportunities for your product to truly add value. And of course, he was tying in the explosive or how PayPal exploded once they identified eBay as the perfect kind of mesh of their product with the kind of delivery of that product. And then that's where they kind of saw their explosive growth. So that had, they developed a great product, but there was a lot that went along with finding the right customer or the right partnership or the right utilization in order to find the growth that they were looking for. So it's which then you're talking about partnerships, then you're talking about sales, then you're talking about, markets, what markets are we going to be in? And so, I think that's where in my mind, it's like, well, are we product led? Should we be should that be a focus, right? Should we say, hey, we're a product led organization, therefore that's a bad thing, and I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question.
Well, it'd be interesting to learn about the transitions, because maybe some organizations, as a result of the market, they transition from a product-led organization to a whatever-led.
Interestingly, I think and I don't know how accurate this statement is. I'd be interested in Christian's perspective. I kind of think of SalesLoft as pretty much a product-led growth organization as it exists today. But I, as far as I know, I don't think you give away anything for free to start with, really, other than maybe some trial level. How do you guys go about that, Christian?
Yeah, we don't have like a freemium model, but I would say our organization is extremely product-led in the fact that it is product's responsibility to make sure that all the different departments are aligned on the customer problems we're trying to solve at a really, really high level. So for me, I'm a product manager at SalesLoft, and there are so many like micro decisions that I make on a daily and weekly and monthly basis that if leadership hasn't aligned every part of the organization on here are the outcomes we're trying to drive for our customers and here are the product pillars we want to go for, then me as a lowly PM, or you have SDRs that you're working with marketing, you're working with customer success managers. To me, there are so many micro decisions that if you're not a product-led organization, in the sense that product hasn't taken the responsibility to align everyone on here's the outcomes we're trying to drive for our customers, then there are just so many little miscommunications that could happen on a daily basis. And one of the things I was thinking of, Blake, when you were talking was, to me, it's always like a trade-off that is always reflected in the product as far as how product-led you are versus how much are you trying to push revenue and monetize. And I think a good example I think of is like Forbes. So if you ever read a Forbes article recently, it's kind of hellish, in my opinion. I hope there's no Forbes people on this call. But they're like ad pop-ups everywhere, and there's like banners, and you're like halfway through the article and you get another pop-up. To me, it's very intentional as far as I've chosen to decrease this customer experience for this amount of revenue. And to me, it's always a trade-off of customer centricness, the ability to read an article and get insights versus the monetization of said article. And I think if you go on the polar opposite of people who are really, really product led, but haven't monetized at all, you get like an Evernote, who, created this great product, gave it to everyone for free. And then they were like, I'd actually like to start charging people for the same thing we gave it to them for free. And people said, no way. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, for our organization, I feel like whenever we build something, it's our leadership's job to make sure that the rest of the company is aligned on, this is the thing that we're building, and we're going to put resources and people who know what they're talking about around this thing that we're going to build. Otherwise, you're just building for people to sell something they may not even believe in. So yeah, to me, it's always about the trade-off. And then how do you have clarity up top so that your micro decisions from people like me align with that.
And I wonder, part of the calculation for me, I think, comes back around to where are you as a company in your development? If I turn back to the lean startup, for example, and think about that tried and true tome. If we think about the lean startup mentality, it says a startup exists for the purpose of identifying a business model and exploring possibilities and identifying a problem worth solving for a market worth serving. And those are my words, not Eric's, but the concept there is you come to a point where you have identified a problem worth building a business model around. And that's where you have to start coming into that alignment to say, okay, now we have to think about our go-to-market, how we're going to get there. And are we building something that, to Blake's point, requires a dedicated sales force and a professional sales force to manage and conduct a complex sale? Or is there something that we can do to simplify our go-to-market and scale our go-to-market so that in some cases, we're always going to need a professional sales force to bring the deal across the finish line to help close the deal. At the same time, how can we scale that through the product so that we can scale up and down more efficiently, more effectively through the use of things like SDRs to help streamline the sales process itself, versus really having to have a professional salesperson out on the street, beating the street, turning up leads and breaking down doors to get in. Charlie, go for it.
Thanks, Jason. This is not a question or an observation, it's just a thought that I'm throwing out there. I think a lot of it, and you kind of hit on it, Jason, is that as a startup, I think you are product led because that's what you're getting. So my not confusion, but my trying to understand this is at what state of the organization does it evolve? And so as a startup, it makes sense. It's product led and everything, but then an organization gets bigger, they got other priorities get in there, and then all of a sudden it doesn't become product led. Or let's say that it's a large corporation, and some corporations aren't product led, they're sales led, right? So I think that's where I'm kind of, again, I'm just throwing this out there as kind of I don't know what it is, but I think it's a lot of the evolution of the company. Now, my question is that can the product team sway that and make an organization product led, or is that something that is management driven? Because at a point, if you're young and everything and you're building a product, and everybody's gonna be around that product, that's a startup mentality. A mature mentality might be that where you've got all these initiatives out there and product just becomes another functional area that it gets, they do something and then you're not product led anymore. To me, it seems like a management thing, but does product have any sway over that? I'd like to hear anybody that has examples of helping drive an organization to a product led organization that maybe wasn't or didn't see the value in it. Because we're constantly dealing with the value of product. I think sometimes in some organizations, whether product is legit, I think those are like large organizations and all that, and what value do they really bring? So just some thoughts that, maybe I triggered somebody else. So.
Yeah, hey, this is Andy. So coming from a large tech organization, I'll tell you that that's somewhat true. But I think that one of the key things when you think about product led, when I think about product led, I think about maybe not the whole product terminology is the best way to say it, but I'm thinking, you can have, I believe you can have a product led experience, but the product may not be, the sell itself kind of thing. It's how it's delivered. It's how do you deliver it to the market? It's kind of that customer experience approach. And what do the customers think about that pull the product through the process, if you will? And so that, when you look at it, to me, I got to look at it at an end-to-end kind of view, where when I was for services, I actually was able to combine a services type of portfolio to our supply chain. Our supply chain had value, and we were trying to turn it into a revenue profit center versus a cost center. And some of those things where, you got to think about the whole value chain of your product, and not just in our role of just product managers or marketers, where you're thinking about development and your message. And I think maybe this is more true in the hardware world, but I've done software, and I got to worry about how it's delivered. There's different ways you can deliver your software product or your services. So I think you got to understand a good product manager really has to understand the entire value chain and where they can leverage the better points of the company and/or leverage into the market to make that product shine. Even if it's not a great differentiated product, it still can be out there in a very good way that can be seen as product led, but it may not be led by the product, if that makes sense.
The only thing I'll add, I think from a org perspective, Charlie, I think a big misconception of product is that it's a support department. And at least keep in mind, I'm totally biased, for my company. But product to me, it has to be seen as a revenue driver for the company that everyone else gets to piggyback off of. And to me, the new features, for example, we have a big rock model. So we have 3 big things or 4 big things we release every quarter, and that requires a lot of coordination across the entire department. So we're releasing this new thing, let's say in Q2, and we have marketing ready to support it. We have sales enabled, ready to sell it. To me, everything falls from the most customer-centric, in my opinion, part of the organization. And seeing product as a revenue driver is the first thing to me. As an org structure, to me, when you transition from a startup mentality where it's let's get things out the door as quickly as possible, because all the decisions we're making, we can balance customer value and business value, but we just got to get stuff out. And then I think when you're in that phase, you're very focused on the components of the product. So I guess, let's see, Facebook would be I have a messenger product team. I have a homepage product team. I have a networking product team. And to me, the transition to maturity for a legit scalable product organization is one where you flip the switch around. Here are the things in our product that we're going to do. So we have a phone thing, we have an email thing, and we have our Cadence platform, which is a selling thing. And you transition to Clayton Christensen's, I think, motto of the jobs to be done. And you start to create your organization around, here are the jobs that we're trying to solve for our customers. And to me, as a mature product org, you align your product teams around the jobs to be solved versus just a thing that you work on. Because at least for a PM like me, it totally changes my reference of I'm working on, let's say, the phone experience, and I want to make the phone experience awesome. Well, now I'm transitioning to workflow, meaning definitely up for interpretation, but to me, it changes my frame of reference of how do I make my sellers' workflow the best, or if customers are buying our product, that means they are asking us to do a job that they currently cannot complete themselves, or a job that they are, let's say, using Excel for. And we need to, as Salesforce, we need to come in and replace their Excel stuff with CRM. And that's the job that they're hiring us for. To me, that's the transition from like a startup mentality to let's focus on the outcomes and the jobs that we need to solve for them. Just my 2 cents.
Yeah, I would also add, in my world, we're trying to move more to this product mentality, and the entire organization is definitely not on board yet, and it's been a challenge. We've had the same challenges to try to convince them. What I've tried to do, and what some of our groups have tried to do, is sort of put financials around, here's the money we're leaving on the table, or the extra expenses, and in our world, sort of, dollars talk. So we've had quite an effort to show potential financial impact to moving to this model, which has been a little bit of a challenge, but we've had some success there, because really the model we have today is very sales led. So I have this quote unquote product, but I don't really have a canonical version of it. I have 15 different close cousins that are the same thing, which can be very, very expensive to maintain. So what we're trying to do is show the financials for here's the current way we do this, versus if we actually, and to me, being product led, I know it means something a little different here, but to me, being product led, I view building something and having a canonical version before we sell it. I view that as a big victory for us. I think sounds like most of you guys are already there, but in our world, we're not, because we just kind of have some unique challenges in our industry. So that's the way we've been trying to do it, is to say, look, we can save or potentially make all of this, all of this revenue. If we switch to this model, we'll be able to decrease our costs rather than building the same thing 15 different times. It gives us an ability to go sell. It gives us an ability to expedite efficiencies across organizations. So that's kind of how we've been trying to do it, and I think that's probably unique to us, and I think most people here on this call are, like I said, probably already there, and this is a problem you guys don't have, but that's been our challenge. It's just, let's build something and let's know what it is before we go sell it.
I think one of the things I'm hearing, if it makes you feel a little bit better, Matt, is I don't think that everybody's already there. I think there's a pretty wide spectrum where we all are. I see Kurt's got his hand up. Kurt, jump in here.
Yeah, I went switching gears a little bit. That's why I used to raise a hand. I don't know how many of us were on the Todd Olson session last year, but something I got out of that, he made us think outside the box a little bit when it came to product led. He said, it's not just the product led growth, which of course we all want, but it was like, he gave an example, which I think is not in the book, hiring. Remember that example? He said, so you got a web app type of product. Some developer goes there and they hit Control-Shift-I, whatever it is, to go into the developer tools. And right at the top of that is, we're hiring JavaScript developers, right? So it's the product actually, Christian was kind of getting at it. It's like, what do all the things we want our product to do, not just for the customer, also for ourselves, like hiring. And so that was a way to get good JavaScript people, maybe, without having to go on to Monster all the time or whatever. So think beyond just sales. It's what else can you get for it? Support is another one. A button that automatically opens up a ticket and you get a support agent, a support help. And what about widgets? I think Todd also talked about it. Just the plain old widget, not an information product like a lot of us do. I put in a sump pump the other day in my basement, and it talks. It's got Internet of Things, and it talks to my phone and tells me every time another 15 gallons is delivered from my basement to my outdoors. I have a spa, my hot tub, that phones home and and I get a notification when the chemicals are a little off, and of course it offers to sell me the chemicals, right?
Of course.
QR codes on anything. Matt, you sell lottery tickets. Put codes on the back of those. I think we do, other web codes and stuff, and you can go get second chance plays and things like that. So my lawnmower has a QR code on it. I put this, here's a good one. I bought this new Jabra wireless headset a few days ago. I love it. I'm not wired anymore. It's great. And I like, how do I connect this thing to my phone and my laptop at the same time? There's a button here. I push it and hold it for 3 seconds. And since it's a Jabra headset, it talked to me and told me how to do all that stuff. So those are all examples of, not just getting more product out there, but look at all the other things your product can do for you.
And that's a really good example of product feeding into another conversation that's growing in volume in our professional world, and that's the customer experience and the customer success perspective. Because you talked about and there's a very blurry line, if there's a line at all, between what we mean when we talk about embedded customer experience and customer success experiences and product-led growth. Are those two sides of the same coin? Because a lot of what you described could go to either of those conversations. I'm looking to see if Jerry's here. Jerry is with the Atlanta CX group here as well. What do you think about that, Jerry?
Yeah, more and more, at least in my work and my colleagues, we're trying very much to get people to bake in customer experience to customer success from the ground floor. And it very much intersects with this conversation, because my ears are still ringing over your first example of Slack, because I would argue, so I might be controversial here, I would argue that there was no thought given to customer experience and customer success with Slack based on the feedback I get from users. I don't know if that's true. I'm just going based solely on what people say about it, and the number of people that frankly are running away from it now because it's creating more confusion, overhead, and friction than it's helping. So yeah, this is I've just been fascinated by the comments here today, because without aligning the experience with the product strategy, I think you're setting yourself up for difficulties in the market and internally, because who gets the final say? If you have to make a decision between investing in experience and investing in product development, or am I going to be experience-led? That wasn't on your list, Jason, before.
Nope, it wasn't.
If you're going to be experience-led, to what extent does that complement or at odds with being any of those other things? Product-led, sales-led. You mentioned one more, and I don't remember what it was now.
Product-led, sales-led, market-led, potentially.
Market-led, yeah, that was it, yeah. But then there's also another path to being experience-led. So I don't have the answer. I know the conversations I have with my clients, my colleagues, about the centrality of experience. But that's why it's fun to come to this group and get kind of the other point of view.
And I'll throw in another lead anchor there. How about design-led organizations, design-led companies? That's one that we haven't talked about. And where does that fall in the spectrum as well? Does that there are so many perspectives on who and how we should lead and what they mean. And I think the perspective that you just shared, Jerry, I think it really resonates with me, because I've been really combining the notion in intent of product-led growth and experience-led growth having a huge intersection and an overlap in principle, at least, but it is a Venn diagram that doesn't have 100% overlap, because I think there's a definite focus on looking at an experience-led. You're going to think about the entire you're building a discipline about thinking about the entire customer journey, the entire customer experience, and how that drives an interface with your company. Your product-led growth mentality is a go-to-market model about getting opportunities and getting opportunities to drive revenue in front of your customers through the product itself. And your product-led growth advocates will tell you, as Christian mentioned a moment ago, it requires alignment from the top of the company all the way through every organization in the company to understand this is how we go to market. This is how we need to drive our customers. But is that fundamentally at odds with the concept of customer experience and experience led, where we're thinking about the organizational experience and the customer's journey and experience across our entire company and across all of our services. Are they at loggerheads, or are they one and the same? What do people think?
Well, just a last thought on that, Jason. They often are, but they shouldn't be. But I think that's more of a reflection of the dysfunctional nature of our corporations. You have senior leaders in these different disciplines that, dare I say, refuse to cooperate and align. And if you take the point of view of the customer journey, somebody's got to buy something at some point. That somebody is a customer, and no matter what strategy you follow, if they either buy enough of it to fuel your growth and repay your owners, or they don't. All the niceties about what we call things fall to the wayside. Either way, you're either so wildly successful because you understood their journey and provided what they wanted, like the jobs to be done framework that was mentioned earlier, or you don't, in which case you get shut down or bought, and maybe somebody else finds a better way to use your assets than you did.
I'll go out and say that Jason, your last comment about the different leads is always confusing to me, because as a product manager, if I don't care about the customer, if I don't care about the user experience, if I don't care about the market, if I don't care about sales, I'm not going to be successful. So even as a product-led company, you cannot ignore all of those other aspects of the puzzle.
I agree. And I think, one of the things that I've taken away from the research and reading I've been doing on the product-led concept is that that statement is 100% true. A huge part of the role of product management in a product-led organization is enabling all corners of the business to understand and interact with the customer experience, Jerry Seifert, with the customer experience that is initiated in the product, and how does that propagate throughout the business, and how does that flow through the entire business? Christian, I see you nodding. How does that resonate with you?
I was just trying to think about, from my personal view, how to answer what Jerry was proposing.
Please.
I think a misconception around product management is that we do a lot of research to identify a problem, to then work with our development and design teams to build things. And that's the only thing. Sorry, I live next to a train station. That's the only thing that we do. And I think where the misconception could be tweaked a little is, let's say I'm building a thing, and I'm doing my normal process of working with my team to build this thing, but there's no sales team that's enabled to sell it, or there's no marketing team enabled to market it. Enabled, I'm using the term enabled as they don't properly understand what I've built. That to me is like a product problem. Like Jerry was mentioning, you can't just release something and say, all right, go figure it out, other teams. To me, if there is not a process in place to support the thing that you're building, then that's on you as the PM. If the sales team doesn't know how to demo or articulate your thing, that's also on you. So at the end of the day, to me, as a PM, it's not just your job to build something, but it's also your job to do just about everything you need to do to support the product. And that could just be not even help building the thing in general. That could be operations, that could be helping on marketing and sales. So I think that mentality from a product-led organization, Jerry, is how I think the leaders should also be aligned on, is that it's not just we're building a thing to release, we need all the supporting structures behind it in order to make this successful. I think that incorporates CX, but I'm not in your world.
No, I agree. And this audience here my compliments, because you're all very highly professional at your work. I've been with you now for 6 or 7 months, and I've just been awestruck at how professional you are at what you do. But we have to remember that there are other parts of the world where it's all about building an MVP, scaling, and cashing out. All right, let's be frank. and in those parts of the world, I don't think people really dwell on these niceties. And what should be is not necessarily what is in many sectors of the economy. So that's a whole separate set of issues. To be honest, I have a client right now that I'm dealing with that's very much in that mindset. Build an MVP, scale by any means necessary, and cash out. And I keep trying to explain to this individual that in the market that he plays in, that's not going to work. It's just destined to fail. But he's sold on it. He got this model in his head from somewhere. So so I'm completely in agreement. I mean, that should be everyone's common agenda, right? Put out things that are fully baked and advance the client's interests in whatever matters most to them. And I'm confident that all of you do that, but I'm not so sure about, the 99.9% of the world that isn't on this call.
Maybe that's part of the reason why 95, that's certainly not the only reason, but maybe that's a big part of the reason why 95% of startups fail.
Yeah, well,
I think there are those that are focused on delivering long-term, permanent, real, lasting, and growing value. And there are those that are focused on, hey, back when I was growing up in the 80s, we talked a lot about get rich quick schemes.
Yeah.
And certainly for a while in the 90s and the early 2000s, the startup space was just get an investor so that you can have an exit. It was all about the exit. And I think excitingly, I think that conversation and perspective still exists to a great degree, but over the last 10 years, the conversations that I've been a part of have been much more focused on how do we create real value? How do we drive change that has an impact on people's lives in a positive way? So I think there's a little bit of both, but perhaps part of the cure for that, Jerry, is taking the analysis and looking at, okay, if your personal goal is to get to that exit, your best path forward is in building an organization that is centered around scaling in the delivery of long-term lasting value. And the way you do that is by building a powerful customer experience. And one of the tactics that you can use in that go-to-market, one of the approaches that you can use in that go-to-market is embedding growth into your product itself so that you can scale that growth in a more automatic fashion. Maybe that's how we start curing that problem. What do you think?
Well, the problem is, and I'm not sure we can get, we can't solve this. This is a bigger issue, but it's really twofold. One is the people that fund startups are not patient, and _, not patient. And second, you can have a nice conversation about what really is the value to society of a startup. Is it to build mature, long-lasting companies that deliver value, or is it to introduce innovation into the market where it can be bought by others, licensed, scaled by others, companies purchased, and what have you? If you believe in the latter philosophy, then you don't worry about things like experience. Your whole point is develop an innovation that the big boys didn't develop. If you believe in building great companies organically from the ground up, then you worry about all these things night and day, and you find people to fund you that are very patient.
I think given the time we have, you're right. We can't solve it all here today, but so I think, and Kurt had to drop off, but I think it was Kurt who was asking a moment ago. He was like, how does, or someone was asking, where does the responsibility lie to drive a company towards whatever we determine the right focus is, and whether it be a product-led focus or a CX-led focus. Does the rank and file product manager, individual contributor, have the power, authority, and means to drive organizational change in an organization that is fundamentally sales-led or that is fundamentally engineering-led? And my hypothesis and assertion is that, yes, the individual contributor does have the ability to influence change. While you can't enforce change, I shared at the very beginning of the call today, I was just finishing reading Empowered over the weekend by Marty Kagan and Chris Jones. And one of the fundamental tenets that Marty was focused on in this book was that the strongest product organizations, the strongest, most innovative, most successful organizations, one of the characteristics that they have is that their product leaders, their vice presidents, their chief product officers, their directors of product, take a strong and active hand in facilitating relationships between individual contributors and product managers with senior leadership, with the C-suite. And his assertion was so strong that if you as a vice president of product are not facilitating those relationships and enabling those conversations, then you're doing it wrong. Mm-hmm. And if you are a product manager, an individual contributor seeking to grow your professional experience, you need to take on the responsibility of forming those personal relationships with your C-suite, with your executive and senior leadership, driving the one-on-ones, the regular lunches, so that you can have those conversations, have those debates with someone who respects you and can learn together with you, and you can help to drive that change at the organizational level. One of my great professional experiences was at Silverpop as an individual contributor, where at least once a quarter, Bill Nussey and I would grab lunch somewhere. Bill was the CEO of Silverpop at the time. And we would, maybe out in the courtyard at the Galleria, hit a food truck, grab lunch and sit down and talk for 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. He's busy as heck, but we always found time to sit down and talk and build that relationship so that we could have meaningful conversations about what it meant to grow the business at Silverpop and evolve the business at Silverpop. And so I think the answer to that question is, as individual contributors, no matter what your level, you do have a responsibility as a product leader to form those relationships and influence that change. Learning how to do it is the hard part. Yeah. And only the best will take on the energy to learn those lessons and to explore those concepts and have those conversations and drive that change. That's Jason's parting thoughts and the soapbox. I will let Jason, somebody else wrap us up.
I believe this group embraces that charge, and I personally fully endorse that thought. In fact, there are way more senior product people in the world than there are senior customer experience people. So yeah, go for it. Any influence you can have in that direction is going to probably be positive in any company, almost any company.
I've got a real good friend, Marcos Arias, who is.
Oh, I know Marcos. Yeah.
Yeah. So Marcos is a really good friend of mine, and he has the position that customer experience is the new product management. Customer experience is product management for the 21st century.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. Others have articulated that same thought. It's a cosmic convergence.
I want to thank everybody for being here today. Next week, we are not going to be here for Product Coffee. We are going to be getting ready for Product Camp Online, which is going to be all via Zoom. We are going to be broadcasting, streaming the keynote and the panel and some of the main sessions through the Product Coffee YouTube channel on Friday and Saturday. So if you can't actually log into Zoom for some reason or another, you'll be able to jump on our YouTube channel and catch some of the sessions as you're able to. Everything is being recorded, but please, even if you can't attend in person or virtually on Friday and Saturday of next week, the 11th and 12th, please go over to productcamponline.org and register if you haven't already, so that we can understand who the constituents are, who's going to be there, who wants to participate, even if you're not able to actually make it. We got 37 sessions lined up, plus a panel on Thursday night to talk about the state of product management with a bunch of industry leaders, including Steve Johnson, who was here last week, Dan Olson, author of the Lean Product Playbook, Paul Young, vice president at Pragmatic Institute, who has spoken here a couple of times as well. So we'd love to see you at Product Camp Online on Friday and Saturday next week, with a kickoff session on Thursday night. And then we'll be back on the 16th with our next Product Coffee session. So thanks everybody for joining us today. And it was good to see you all.